So let's take a project location. I'm going to use King. Actually, for this one, I'm not going to use King County because I always use King County. Let's try Thurston County. So not really particularly important. By the way, WWHM 2012 is 100% free. If you go to www.clearcreeksolutions.info, go to the downloads tab, go to WWHM 2012, you can get it 100% free. And you can model along with me using the exact software I have. So all you're going to want to do is select a location on the map. I selected Thurston County 2012. It doesn't really matter for this situation. And then you want to left click, and that selects your rain gauge data. So now we have the gauge selected. This is the Olympia Airport rain gauge. Its precipitation factor is 1.0. All the precipitation factor is doing is it's modifying the rain gauge data based on the elevation of the location you selected. So if I picked like a location here, that might still be the Olympia rain gauge, but the elevation might be different. And so it applies a factor to that location, and then so it more accurately can represent what the rainfall looks like. So I'll make sure I'm not missing any questions. Okay, good. So it can more accurately represent what the rainfall would look like in that specific location within that rain gauge, if that makes sense. So this is our schematic block, and I'm sure many of you are probably familiar with this. And I'm going to build out a project here. And so the basis of basically any project is going to be this land use basin element. And we can see it here. We've added it to the schematic. It doesn't matter where it is in the schematic, just as long as you keep track of what it's doing with relation to the other elements in your project. But for this one, I'm going to add 2 acres of sea forest flat. So we got 2 acres of till forest flat land use, right? Right click, connect to point of compliance. This allows you to analyze this point in your project here. And now I'm going to run the scenario. And what it's going to do is going to generate the runoff, the continuous simulation runoff, and part of the flow frequency curve for this specific project setup. And then we're going to look at the mitigated scenario, and then we're going to be able to see the difference of what we need to do to help meet that minimum requirement, number 7. It's like if I went here, this is the analysis tab over here, point of compliance 1. Okay, so I can't do a comparison yet, but when I run them both, it will be able to do that. So here's the mitigate scenario. So now we're going with something a little different here. Now we're going to have 1 acre. Let's say we develop this site, okay? And we've decided that half of this site is going to be parking lots flat. A 1/4 acre of it's going to be sidewalks flat. And then a 1/4 acre of it's going to be driveways flat. So we got 1 acre of impervious total. Now we need to make sure our land use area is still the same. So that's 1, that was 2, this is 1 acre, and then let's say we left half of the land use completely untouched. So we went half, or let's say we left half an acre, I should say, untouched, and a half acre end up being lawns flat, for example. So we have half an acre of forest, half acre of lawn, a 1/4 acre of driveways flat, a 1/4 acre of sidewalks flat, and then half an acre of parking flat. And this is our project location. You got a developer, he's developing this plot of land, and this is what we have now. And so I'm going to connect this to point of compliance, and I'm going to run it again. Hopefully this is all making sense so far. And so this is like I said, this is kind of a basic example of what's going on in WWHM 2012. But still, still very useful, and still can accurately represent a lot of projects happening today, for example. So we had 2 acres of pervious. Now we have an acre of pervious and an acre of impervious. So what's going to happen? There's going to be more runoff, right? So if we go to the analysis tab here, point of compliance 1, but we're not looking at it as pure total volume, right? That's not what we're really concerned about. What we're concerned about is how often are those pre-developed flow values being exceeded in this new mitigated circumstance here. So we're not looking to a single event outlook would be, or a single event mindset would be, we have this much total volume when we had this stormwater event or this rainfall event. So it's like we had this much volume when we had this stormwater event here, or rainfall event. And then now in the mitigated, when we have this rainfall event, we now have this much total volume. And so this, And so we must design a facility this big to account for that much change in volume. That's not how we want to think about this. How we want to think about this is, like I said, continuous simulation. How often were the pre-developed flows that we've identified within that erosive flow range, how often are those pre-developed flows being exceeded? And so this is a great example because this facility absolutely fails, and it should, right? So there were 18,956 times that this flow was exceeded in the pre-developed scenario, and then 69,637 times that this flow was exceeded in the mitigated scenario. And so this obviously fails because this is one of the identified erosive flows in the erosive flow range. And we can't have that according to minimum requirement number 7. And so it failed for all of them, obviously, right? And so how are we going to fix this? Well, we need to now install some form of detention retention facility on the project site. So remove our point of compliance from here. And so now let's, I always use a pond, let's use a vault instead. So let's say, okay, hey, we're going to install a stormwater vault on this project site. And this is going to contain some of that runoff that we're getting from the site. And so we're going to attach the surface flow and interflow there. Now we have this vault element. Let's connect to point of compliance. And so what I want to do here is I want to just select quick vault. And all quick vault does is it just fills in all the vault values. So we can run it and see what sort of flow duration curve we're getting now. It doesn't actually model the facility. It just fills in all the values so you can run the model. This is where we're actually going to do the manual modeling, and then you can even auto size it. So let's run this. We have a 200-foot length vault. It's 200 feet wide and it's 7 feet deep. Let's see what this does. Does this model the facility? Or will this be enough to keep us from exceeding all those flow values? Well, let's find out, right? This is what WWHM 2012 allows us to do very quickly. We go back to the analysis, point of compliance 1. And now we'll look at that stream protection duration again, and we'll see what it looks like this time. It'll be interesting. And so just for reference, the blue curve is always pre-developed and the red is always the mitigated scenario. And so we can see it failed again for a lot of the flows, but passed for some because now we have some storage on site, but not enough for these smaller flows, right? It wasn't able to accomplish our task there. So what do we need to do? Well, a lot of people say, well, it needs to account for these smaller flows. Let's make the facility bigger. Let's double the length, for example. Well, let's see what happens. So now we have we've just doubled the length of our facility, or doubled the total area, doubled the total volume. And so let's see if that's able to account for these smaller flows. And so this is why this will be a great example of why a single event approach just specifically does not work for Western Washington, but is also just sort of an inferior approach as a whole for designing stormwater detention facilities, is because a single event approach can't account for these smaller flows that are occurring, that are causing these erosive flows, when you're just looking at a total volume snapshot, because that's what single event hydrology is. It's just a snapshot of what's occurring. Continuous simulation is able to give you a much bigger picture of what's going on the project site. But when you're thinking single event, you're just, I have this event, I have this much volume, and I need a facility this big to account for this much volume. And I get questions and people asking me in projects all the time, well, what's the total volume? Total volume, total volume. And it's like, total volume is irrelevant in this sort of project when you're trying to meet this minimum requirement. It doesn't matter. What we're looking at is an entire percent time exceeding flow duration curve. And that's what a lot of people aren't able to wrap their heads around sometimes, because when you're taught in school that, hey, the single event hydrology is the way it's done, that's just kind of the mindset you have. But in Western Washington, it works completely differently. And in more and more jurisdictions over the years, as continuous simulation becomes more popular, this is kind of the method that's occurring. Okay, so we add some more total storage. It's able to account for some of these flows. So you're thinking, okay, We just need to make this facility really big, and we'll finally get what we want, right? All right, so now we're going to have, not 10,000, 1,000 foot length facility now. Really big. I mean, this is going to be a really big facility, right? And so this is what I'm going to show you why using something like auto vault would be a better approach. But you can manually size, and that's what we're doing. And we're seeing the results that we're getting here. But you're going to want to find that using something like auto vault, which auto sizes your facility to meet the flow duration standard, but also keep the facility at the smallest size possible, is the best way to model your detention facilities in WWHM 2012. Because you're going to find that modifying the outlet structure data is really what's going to determine, because that's going to determine when those flows are released, and how much flow is released is going to be able to impact meeting that flow duration standard quite a bit. And so if we looked at point of compliance 1 again, excuse me. And so now it's meeting a lot of the flows, but you'll find that we're going to have to make this facility really, really, really big to meet these small flows, and we might not even meet these flows. So what is the solution here? And so the solution I would suggest would be something like auto vault. That'll properly size the facility. We'll get dimensions smaller than these. I mean, you're thinking about, we now have a 20 or 200 times 1,000, a 200,000 square foot facility on a 2-acre site, right? It's insane how big this facility needs to be. If you use something like auto vault, we're going to end up with a much smaller facility. Now this takes like 15-20 minutes, so I'm not going to spend the time running auto vault, but that's what I would take, the approach I would take in this project, for example. So you can do that on your own to see what happens. I'm not going to waste your time with that, but I just wanted to show you what the process was, maybe the iterative process for looking at that flow duration curve to get the answer you're looking for. Now, the other thing I wanted to cover is I want to talk a little bit about bioretention and sort of the best ways to model bioretention. We do have a course called the Bioretention Masterclass. That is a very extensive course on how to model bioretention, but I do like to touch upon it in these sort of shorter workshops. If you have any questions about any modeling situations or about the software in general, you can put that in the chat, and we can talk about that instead. But I do want to talk a bit about bioretention as well. So this is the bioretention element here. And it's one of the most complicated elements to probably model in the entire software. There's just a lot to look at here. And so, like I said, we covered it very, very, very in-depth in our course. But we also have some free material to help people model the bioretention facilities. And so let's think about a project where we want to, have a detention facility retain the stormwater on the site, but we also want, for some reason, we need to meet that minimum requirement where we need to also filter the stormwater. And so in this case, we have a bioretention facility, and then it's going downstream to a pond. And these are very difficult situations to model if you don't know what you're doing. And you got to be very careful with this one. So the approach you're going to want to take is I'm actually going to disconnect this. And I'm not going to do this in real time because of the time because of the time it can take. But you want to model, in my opinion, you'll want to model this pond separately here. So we would model this pond to meet flow duration standard. For example, whatever that may be. Then I would disconnect this pond here from the point of compliance, disconnect this element here. Then we add in the bioretention, and sure, that may add a bit more storage, but not a ton, and we already have a modeled facility here. But now we can model this bioretention to meet our filtration requirement. So connect to point of compliance. I'm going to use quick swale. For most modeling situations, we're going to want to underdrain, and we're going to want to use simple bioretention. What simple bioretention does is it disables a check inside the software that ends up making the bioretention modeling time way slower. It takes a lot more time. And in 99% of cases, you're not going to need that check. So just selecting use simple bioretention in basically all your cases is going to really help. And it's going to help you be able to run the project a lot faster. I like to go with a KSAT safety factor 2, but that can depend on your project location. And I like to add an inch of the third soil layer gravel. This is not like definitives. This is just sort of in general approach that I take sometimes when modeling bioretention here. And so this is quick soil. And so, like I said, this just fills in the values for the bioretention. This is not a modeled facility, but I want to run this and see what % filtered we're getting here. Something else about the bioretention is Ecology has been doing some research. Did you say 1 inch for gravel? Yes, I added 1 inch of gravel on the third soil layer. That's what I have down here. You can select anything. I just went with gravel for that one. I have the stormwater management 12 inch per hour one in the first layer. The second layer is sand, and the third layer is the gravel. Yep. Is that diameter in feet? Which diameter are you referencing? There's many diameters. This is depth feet. Is the dimension? Yes, the dimension is feet. For the material layers for the bioretention, the dimension is feet. So depth feet. So we have 1.5 feet of the first layer, 1.5 feet of the sand, and then 1 foot of the gravel. Total of 4 feet. Depth for the soil layer. Dimension for gravel, 1 foot is what I have for that. And now we could enable infiltration. That's a much more complicated design. I'm not going to do that. That's covered in our course, however. And so this just so happened to meet, which is actually kind of surprising. 93.37% filtered. However, this facility may not be optimally sized for our project situation here. I mean, a 208 by 208 bioretention, it's pretty big. So let's see what we can do if we were to use the size water quality feature. I think that might be a better approach on this one. So I'm going to use size water quality. Click this box here. I'm not going to enter in any of this information. I will click user defined soil layers because I want to use these values that I inputted here. I'm going to click size for water quality. And now it's going to optimally size that facility, just like we have with something like AutoPond or AutoVault or any of these other stormwater sizing features, or the commercial toolbox, which I did a whole live lesson on the commercial toolbox. And we also have a course on all the commercial elements there. And the auto size feature. And so this is similar to that. There's also an auto size feature for sizing the facility to meet flow duration. That's a little more difficult because the bioretention is not necessarily 100% supposed to meet flow duration. It's not necessarily 100% a flow duration facility, or storage facility is what I meant to say. That's for something more like a pond or a vault. Well, I think before I got the question, Ecology has been doing research on the bioretention facility, and they found that when the bioretention facility was properly designed in WWHM 2012 and then properly constructed on the project site, that WWHM 2012 actually does a really, really good job at accurately determining how that facility is going to perform out in the real world, which is great news, which shows you can trust what you're doing in the software. You can trust that it'll work out in the real world. And that's what the research has been showing. And then that research, I think, has been approved for another phase. So we're going to learn more about the effectiveness of the bioretention facility. So that's pretty cool. If you're going to the American Water Resources Association conference, that's in November 7th to November 8th, I believe. Or that might be a 3-day conference, actually. All I know is Clear Creek Solutions is going to be doing a couple talks on the 7th and on the 8th. I believe on the Tuesday, I'm doing a talk at 10:30, and then on the Monday we have a talk at or noon. We're doing a presentation. One of them is going to be on that bioretention research, and then the other presentation session, I think I'm also moderating that session at the American Water Resources Association conference that's in Seattle. And I think, and then the other presentation I'm doing on is the merger of using hydrology and hydraulic software and how we need to be able to use that together and what are some possible solutions. So 2 presentations at that conference. I don't know if anyone's going to that conference, but or anyone in the audience is going to that conference, but it'll be a widely attended conference, so I'm looking forward to that. But we'll be doing a presentation on the effectiveness of that research, and so I hope to be filming those presentations too, so people can see them. So you can see that it's going through the iterations, and so look where we're at here. 25 by 25 feet, much better design for our bioretention. It's not taking up our whole project site like it was before. So it's like if you're not careful and you don't strategically size these facilities using the auto features, and you may have predetermined dimensions that you're like, we need to use these dimensions for the site, and that's fine. But you also need to check that you meet the flow duration standards. But if you don't use the auto sizing features properly, you're going to end up with giant facilities, right? So, and you're going to find out, great, I have a developed project site for my developer, and my detention facilities also take up his entire project site, and so that's, or his or her project site, and so that's not really what you're shooting for here. You utilize these features in the software will help you, and so it's just running through iterations, resizing, looking for the total percent filter. 91% is the target for us. Sometimes I get confused. 93%. 93% is an A, not what we need for the bioretention. 91% is the water quality percent filter goal that we're shooting for here. And so that's what this is running here. And like I said, you'll want to check your project site and location for that KSAT safety factor. I have a bunch of videos on bioretention design if you're more curious about that. And then some of the commercial elements can be modeled similarly to the bioretention facility. And so now we have a 24 by 24. It's down to 92. So I'm gonna stop it there. We're getting pretty close at this point. It may be able to optimize it a little more, but that gives you an idea of how well the auto size feature can work. And so if I disconnect that point of compliance, connected to point of compliance there, and we ran this scenario. Now this was an auto size, so this will not be perfect here, but I just want to show you that you can meet that water quality minimum requirement, and then you can also meet that the flow duration curve. Like I said, I've been a little sick this week, so like I'm trying to remember my minimum requirements. Minimum requirement number 6 and 7 there, and then you can meet those both in the same project, and that's sort of the process you'll want to go through there. And so that's all I had intended to cover for this workshop. If everyone has any questions, they can ask them, or any elements you have any questions on, or WWHM 2012, you can go ahead. Other than that I just want to cover those things again. Hadn't had a live workshop for a while. I will be re-uploading this, of course, sending out in the emails and posting it so everyone can watch it again and review it. I also have previous workshops on our YouTube channel, so you can see those there. A lot of good free information there. So we have the free information on the YouTube channel. We have the free WWHM 2012 course, which I'm sure a lot of you have probably accessed by now. But we have the free course there. If you go to our website, the banner right at the top says you can get our free WWHM 2012 training right there. And then, of course, we have our paid material, the WWHM 2012 Academy being the most popular. We have a sale upcoming for that soon to grab that course. Or there's our one-on-one consulting. So what Clear Creek Solutions does is if you pay for a one-on-one consulting, we'll help you with any project or anything related to your hydrology project one-on-one. We can even teach you how to use aspects of the software one-on-one, and that's really what our consulting does. So that's how we can help you with your modeling. We help you with free material like this.